Hey everybody, this is Marshall Townsend, and welcome back to the Growing Leadership blog. This is number 11, and it's called Digging Out from Average. Now, yesterday, our blog number 10 was called Go for Average, and I shared with you some horror stories. I shared with you stories about a leader, a battalion commander, whose basic command philosophy was never do anything right, never do anything wrong. Simply stay in the middle. And by doing that, never do anything great, never do anything bad, you would not be noticed. And basically slip through the cracks and continue to advance and get promoted up the chain because nobody really took notice of you. And that was openly stated his philosophy. And this guy was a dirtbag. He is the best way I can describe it as a leader. He was a dirtbag who moved up and ultimately got himself relieved, but not until he hurt a lot of people along the way. He hurt a lot of officers and non-commissioned officers by his leadership philosophy. Then I jumped over and talked about the contract world, where if you're doing a contract with a government contract, there is a specification that's written for what the contract's supposed to be. And then you take 3 different bidders that come in and produce a product to match the contract. And their job is to never do anything great, never do anything bad, but to stay within the limits of the contract. And in doing so, get the contract, get the money from the government to produce the product. And this is the entire philosophy of Six Sigma, is stay within the variance. Don't, not less, not more, stay average, stay within the parameters. And in doing so, manage the operation, manage your organization, manage the output. That is the essence of Six Sigma, being a PMP and a manager. The goal of a manager is to never, ever exceed expectations. I told you yesterday that my comparison to the campfire. The job of the manager is to keep the campfire going, but not let the campfire go anywhere. Keep it right where it's at, right inside the fire ring, which is a good thing when it comes to campfires. But campfire inside keep it going, but make sure it goes nowhere. That's the basic element of to me, being average is thinking in terms of a manager. Now, when I worked with those contracts with the government and I saw that happening, I had to think about that. So this is how things work. Let's say you take it, and this is why we understand there's huge amount of money spent on contracts. Like if I was going to have a hammer, I would write the specifications for, I need a tool to pound in a nail into a board. I need a tool to pound a board. So I write a specification. Now the specification for that contract is limited by my imagination and the words that I put on paper. So I described to you, I need a tool to be able to pound a nail into a board. 3 contractors show up. One guy shows up with a rock. One guy shows up with a rock tied to a stick. And a third guy shows up with a claw hammer. And the concept is, okay, not only can I pound the nail in, I can also remove the nail with the claw. But that claw is not in the specification. So when it comes to time to award the contract, they're not going to give it to this guy or this company because he exceeded expectations. No, we're going to stay within the parameters, and we're probably going to take the guy who has the rock tied to the stick and award him the contract. But I like this guy's idea. So now I got to go develop another contract that says I need a tool to pull out the nail. And again, we put it out to the field. And again, we come back with a crowbar. So now we've got in our inventory a rock tied to a stick and a crowbar, instead of having the two tools combined into one. And we ended up spending 10 times the amount of money. This is why you wind up with a $10,000 hammer, is you've got to pay for all of that, development, intervention, etc. And that's just the way things are. That's the way things are, Marshall, in the contract. Well, don't you understand? Well, I had the opportunity about the same time when I got done working with the battlefield management system project and watching all that happen. I got assigned to work with a company called, not a company, government agency called DARPA, Defense Advanced Research Project Agency. And this is not the DARPA that's in the movies. Maybe it is, but this is the real DARPA. We worked on a project called Simnet, Simulation Networking. And this was first generation, what we would all know today as, Skyrim, as Call of Duty, any of those three-dimensional gaming systems where multiple players from multiple locations jump into a database and can interact with each other in a database. So this is 1985, 86 timeframe at Fort Knox, Kentucky. DARPA comes in with Simnet. I'm the project officer assigned to it. And it's amazing. Again, we are talking in 1985. Macintosh had just come out. You still had a green screen and an amber screen monitor at the time. I was working with three-dimensional gaming in a database with tank crews, 4-man tank crews that would get in a simulator and can drive around in a simulation, interact with other vehicles, interact with enemy targets or enemy combat vehicles, AI systems that interacted back with you, and basically do warfare in this three-dimensional world. And you guys, like I say, this is first generation of it, but it was extremely sophisticated. But one of the problems I learned is that when we stood up the first 4 vehicles of the system and plugged them in, and we're in the database, the only way to watch what was going on in the three-dimensional world was to climb into one of the tanks and drive along. So you get in the loader's hatch, and you had a vision block in the loader's hatch where you looked at the vision block and you could turn it and look, but you were limited to only seeing what the tank crew saw and where the tank crew went. So there was the only way to interact with the world that was created. So sitting down one day, I said, this is not going to work for us. As the project officer, assigned as the SME, subject matter expert to the project from the armor school, I said, I can't do an after action review this way. I can't sit down and help the participants in a training exercise inside there with me having to ride around in the tank and only seeing what they see. I said, what I need is a God Jeep. At that time, we called it a God Jeep. That is, I want the ability to be invisible, and I want to be able to fly in the air behind or above or around the vehicles so I can be in the database, but watch from a remote location so I can see what's going on, while at the same time listening to radio and intercom transmissions. See, and if we went back to the other style of decision making, of contract building, we would have to go back to the original contract and write in that requirement. But DARPA was on a different model. DARPA was on, we're going to build this and we're going to make changes on the go. We're brand new technology. We're going to evaluate. We're going to change as necessary and innovate on the fly. While we not go back to the drawing board, recommit, but every time we come up with a new idea, we're just going to re-innovate and work on it. So it was funny that I mentioned that day, that's what I needed. And about a week later, I walked into the facility and the crew that was working and building the system came running over and said, okay, this is what we built you. And basically I went over set and I had a Captain Kirk's chair, where I had a chair with a set of monitors, a helicopter control stick, and I could fly throughout the database and watch. They invented that on the fly without having to go back to the drawing board. So this was a big difference in us being able to influence the outcome of a contract and what we were building. That was light years jump between what I had witnessed between trying to get 3 contractors to come up with a solution to solve a problem which somebody had written out versus the ability to write and innovate on the fly. Now, why did I tell you all that? Now, that was a long story to tell you, but here's the thing. In your company right now, many business owners are still working off a 5-year plan, which they wrote 2 years ago, a year ago, 3 years ago, 5 years ago. You're working off a 5-year plan that says this is what we're going to do. And during this time, you have not innovated. You have not changed. You're sticking to your plan. You're stuck with the ideas, the old ideas, or you are limited by what you wrote in your 5-year plan. That has to go away. You have to put that away right now, and you have to begin innovating and changing on the fly. Now, I know a lot of us have been doing that over the time, but right now, more than ever, as we transition to the next phase out of the COVID to the post-COVID to where we go in the future, trying to stick with average, staying within the parameters of your contract, staying within the dimensions of the things you said, okay, this is what all I have to do to be successful, needs to go away and be replaced with a dynamic decision-making process that allows you to take advantage of new things, take advantage of innovation and ideas as you go and move forward into the future. That's what DARPA was doing, and DARPA changed. DARPA could not have built that 3-dimensional world, innovated that, turned it into hundreds of simulators that ultimately linked into together and bring in A-10s, helicopters, and all other types of things in that database without being able to innovate on the fly. You've got to be able to do the same thing in your business. So right now, you need to dig out of accepting average as your course of action and get into the world of innovation and move forward into success and into the future. All right, long discussion today, but thanks for tuning in. All right, have a good one. We'll see you tomorrow.